Rev, where are we without that piece of tape? You know, Eddie Glaude said something in the last hour that'll haunt me for a long time. He said the tape basically is our bind, because you need the tape, and I think these are Eddie's words. Eddie said you need the tape to show white people what police officers do to black men in America. But basically watching the tape is re-traumatizing many people over and over again.
It is traumatizing, but don't forget, we had a tape with Eric Garner, and they didn't prosecute. So what we need is justice. We need for the justice system to operate fairly for everyone. And I don't think that is something unreasonable. I think, though, that is where the anger comes from, is people say, how many tapes are we going to see before you say, wait a minute, we are not going to marginalize the lives of people. There's no reason this man is dead. There's no reason these officers are not in jail.
Rev, there were protests on the streets of Los Angeles and I believe in Chicago as well. I think that leaders in Washington forget that Americans can hold more than one thought, more than one bucket of pain in their hearts at once. But it is true that the pandemic has disproportionately hurt communities of color. Obviously, this is an instance of police officers targeting, killing an African-American man on the street. Just talk about all that is being put onto the African-American community right now today.
When you look at it today, Nicolle, not only are we the ones that are bearing the overwhelming brunt of the pandemic, we are disproportionately the ones dying, disproportionately the ones found positive with the coronavirus. We are disproportionately the ones not getting the stimulus money with our small businesses. On top of that, in 30 days, we've seen the killing in Brunswick of Ahmaud Arbery. We've seen this young lady, Breonna Taylor, in Louisville, killed in her house when the officers went to the wrong house to try to get a man who was already in custody. And when her boyfriend shot a legal weapon, they came back with 20 rounds of fire that 8 bullets killed her. And now we see this all in 30 days during the pandemic. And many people are saying, how much can we take? And I think that it's time for the country to pause and really deal with the racial imbalance in the criminal justice system.
Rev, who leads that conversation? Obviously, we have a president who is out of the closet with views that many view as blatantly, flagrantly racist. So who leads that? Who leads us to the table where we even have that conversation?
Well, it should be led right with those that are sworn to protect us, that there'll be equal protection under the law. It should be led by the President of the United States and the Congress and the Senate. It seems to me that if we can see this kind of outrage, even in a pandemic, that we should at least see in the halls of power a recognition that it's time to move. The president belatedly made a statement, but he's not made any statements in the 3.5 years he's been in, less known the years he's been a public figure. So he should know people are going to look at his words and say, are they empty words? I think that this could be a tipping point to have this conversation, but you cannot have a conversation until these officers are arrested and show that we're dealing on a playing field that is even and that is fair to everyone. Without that, it's talk with no action. We don't just need a conversation. We need the implementation and execution of the law.
Rev, if you're able to, please stay with us. We're waiting for this FBI press conference to start. But I want to add to our conversation Maya Wiley, who's been listening into all this. Maya, where do you think, I mean, to the question that I put to the Rev, where does this conversation take place? And I don't want to ask that in a, where do we sign up to help? I want to ask you where we say the ugly truths. I mean, the ugly truth is that we don't have a president who has much trust in the African-American community. We have a candidate in Joe Biden who has a lot of support among African-Americans in every state that's voted in a primaries have overwhelming support. But how we are in this weird gap where there is a real leadership vacuum at the federal level.
You're absolutely right, Nicolle. And frankly, I think the conversation starts right here, the conversation that we're having right now. I think the Rev is absolutely right about the importance of law enforcement to demonstrate that it is here to protect the public safety of people in this country who are Black, and to stand up for that by showing up and by prosecuting these officers. I also think that we have to show up, because one of the things I'm struck by is for example, the description of George Floyd as a gentle giant. Well, what if George Floyd had a felony record? Would it be okay for these officers to kill him by strangulation when he was not yet charged with a crime? And in fact, it wasn't even clear whether he had committed one. You know, part of the problem that we have here is it is hard to be a police officer. It is really hard to be Black in America. There is this notion that there's no redemption for us, that the stereotypes that we live down because we see the parade of Black faces connected with criminal activity, and what unfortunately that reinforces the stereotype that, well, if more Black people are being killed by police, it's because more Black people are criminals. I don't know a George Floyd, and I can tell you right now, if he tried to pass a bad $20 bill, he should still be alive, and they should still be guilty, and they should still be investigated and charged with a homicide. And part of the real conversation we have to have is what our stereotypes are and what we have to do right here on the media to start to dismantle them. It's not enough to say that, you know, George Floyd didn't deserve to die. It's that no Black person deserves to die. And that is something that law enforcement has to show up for, and that we all have to show up for.
I don't want to lose this thread at all, Frank Figliuzzi. Please pick it up. What on earth justifies a nonviolent interaction with police and anyone, an African-American man, a white woman, anyone, over a forged check? What on earth are the things that transpire for the suspect, in this case George Floyd, to end up handcuffed, pinned down on the pavement with a knee to his neck till he dies?
There is a cultural problem across the law enforcement community. And as someone who spent his FBI career moving around the country and having the privilege to work in many diverse communities, I often came to the conclusion that you get what you pay for with regard to your police department. By that, I mean good training, solid community relationships. All of that takes constant reinforcement, and that also takes money. And it also takes a pay scale that attracts the right people and recruits and assesses the right people. But what this comes down to, Nicolle, is leadership. Leadership at the chief or superintendent level, at the mayor and at the state level. And what I see happening throughout the Minneapolis area over the years points to broken leadership. And if we're going to talk about leadership in this context, we've got to talk about the President of the United States, who during his tenure addressed a law enforcement crowd and said, essentially, it's okay to not be nice to your subject. You need to rough them up more. I've got your back. That's what this president has said. And the irony is not lost on me that he just tweeted that he sent the FBI and DOJ into Minneapolis, which, by the way, he did not. They had opened cases immediately. So the irony of a president saying it's okay for cops to rough people up and not be so nice, and hey, I'm on this, I'm going to investigate it, should not be lost on anybody.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.